Hi, welcome to the third Ducks in a Row. This is about end of life considerations, and welcome everybody. Welcome. All right, I would love to see a show of hands for those of you who have been here for all three of this Ducks in a Row series. All right, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for being here tonight. My name is Tracy Sprower. I am the education manager for Met How at Home. And this Ducks in a Row series, we kind of got the idea from a group in Tenasket, actually, that was calling it Ducks in a Row. But there's been an advanced care planning group in the Met How Valley that's a collaboration between Met How at Home, Lookout Coalition. This is Betsy Weiss from the Lookout Coalition. Room 1, this is Stephanie Foster from Room 1. We've got Sheila Brandenburg from Okanagan Palliative Care. Karen Jacobson isn't here tonight, but she's been here for the previous two, also from Palliative Care. And then we've got Jocelyn Murray, who is passionate about advanced care planning. Marisa Monteverde. So thank you all for being here. What you're going to experience this evening is really just a little sampler plate of things to think about and options, because we're big believers in, if we don't know our choices, then we lose choice. And so we're not prescribing one thing or another, but we just really want our community to have the information so that you can make choices for yourself, and you can get those written down and you can share it with your people who are going to be able to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. And so last week, Karen read this beautiful poem, and I asked her to send it to me, and said, because I'd like to start with this one again. And I don't remember who wrote this, and I'm not sure. Is this in your way, Susie? There. Is that better? Okay. So I don't know who to attribute this to, but I think it might have come from a Lakota Sioux writer. Maybe Bruce knows.
I don't.
Okay. All right. All things come and go, and may we be at peace on this blessed day, whether it brings sunlight or storms, serenity or struggle. May we be at peace in passing through it, doing what needs to be done, living as fully as we can, as authentically as we can, at peace in our soul. Know that all things come and go on the way to where we are called to be. They pass around us, they pass over and under us, but they do not define us or contain us. For our life is not an inventory of pains or pleasures, but a sonnet of the spirit, a mystery fashioned from and for eternity, a strength so powerful that it can afford to be vulnerable to love. May we be at peace on this blessed day. So with that, I welcome you all. And just also please know that all of us in this advanced care planning group, we're here for you year round. This is just an opportunity for you to see to meet some of us, to see us in action, to build that relationship. And so I really hope that you'll feel like you can reach out. You can get a hold of, you can always call Met How at Home and get forwarded where you need to go if you have any kinds of advanced care planning questions or anything that comes up, any questions from these events. There are a couple of bathrooms either direction out here. Please feel free to get up as you need to. And if something crazy happened and we needed to evacuate the building, rolls And you guys back here, everybody's going out that back door. So that just opens up and we'll just file on back out that way, but I'm sure we made it the last 2 weeks, so I think we're good. But you never know. And with that, we're gonna start off this evening with our beloved Dr. Betsy Weiss. I'm sure many of you are familiar with her, and she's gonna talk to us about the medical aid in dying and visa options.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here. And I've talked about this topic a lot, and you would think that it would not make me anxious to be in front of a group, but once again, medical aid in dying in Washington and voluntarily stopping eating and drinking are my topics for tonight. And I am going to watch the clock, and Stephanie's going to watch me because I can probably talk for a long time about this stuff. Go ahead. First, I got some help with these slides from End of Life Washington, which is an organization that is an advocacy group for people who are choosing medical aid in dying. And I'm a volunteer for them. I volunteer as both a physician and as a guide through the process. It's a little bit of a confusing process, and it helps to have somebody who has had some experience sometimes to help navigate the system. End of Life Washington has a lot of educational resources on their website about end of life that touches on so many parts of what we have talked about in this program and more. And I encourage you to check it out. The volunteer client advisors that's me. And there are others in the Valley. Jocelyn has had some experience, and there are other people who have been trained as volunteers. It also does advocacy and public policy. So the people of Washington decided that they wanted to have medical aid in dying as an option at end of life in 2008. And with a citizens initiative, this became law. And then the first patients who decided they wanted to participate in this law were in 2009. What it means is that what they were voting for was having the option of having a physician write a prescription for you to hasten your death if you have a terminal illness. Who uses medical aid in dying? Mostly it's older people. It has to be people who are terminally ill. So the variety of ages and diagnoses are there on the left-hand side of the screen. But all kinds of people make this choice. More on the west side than the east side of the Cascades. I think in large measure that has to do with access. Access to providers who are will support you and will help you navigate the system. Go ahead. Why do people choose this? Any of you who have thought about this as an option have your own reasons. But the biggest part of the biggest reason that we see people choosing this is really the loss of autonomy and loss of sense of control over your own life. Death is hard. It is just a hard process for almost everyone. And there's a tremendous amount of letting go as you approach dying, and letting go of control over what's happening in your life. And for many people, being able to have this as an option is tremendously reassuring, that they know that if there is too much pain or they feel too burdened by the ways their illness is affecting their life and their body, that this is an option for them. Many people who initiate the process feel a tremendous sense of relief once things are in place. And it's the majority of people who are choosing this do follow through, but there's a significant portion of people who really just want to know it's there if they need it. So loss of ability to engage in activities that give them joy, loss of autonomy, loss of dignity. Inadequate pain control is a reason that we don't like to see people choosing this, because there's usually enough avenues to manage pain that this can be addressed in other ways. But there are times where people struggle with that. They don't want to lose their ability to think clearly. And there is this balance at times between requiring so much medicine that it alters how they're thinking, how they are in the world, and they hate that feeling and would rather stay alert and awake and present, and would choose to hasten their death rather than have the effects of the medicine, which might relieve their pain, alter their consciousness. Words matter. I had a person who I worked with in another way, who I suggested that they wanted them to be aware of this as an option. And he had grown up Catholic, and the idea of using medical aid in dying felt very wrong to him. He had no problem, however, asking his caregivers to give him lethal medicine. Now, that's illegal. For the caregivers to give him medicine with the expectation that it's going to take his life is illegal. This is legal. And we think of it as people who want to live, but want to live on their own terms and have a terminal illness. Suicide is obviously something that is different, and euthanasia which is legal in a number of places, including Canada, involves having a medical provider administer the medicine. In the law in Washington, you have to be able to administer the medicines yourself. So how does this work? What do you have to do to get it done? You have to qualify for it. And you have to be 18 or over. You have to be a resident of Washington. You have to have a terminal illness. You have to have 2 doctors say your prognosis, or the expectation of how long that you're going to live, is less than 6 months. Now, every doctor will tell you that they're not soothsayers, or if they don't tell you that, don't believe anything else they tell you. They may not be right, but that with all that is known and all that they can predict, that the likelihood of you dying is within 6 months is expected. You have to be able to understand what you're doing. You don't have to be able to know all about, you have a great recent memory, but you have to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. If you decide to go to self-administer this medication, you have to be able to self-administer the medicine. There are times as people get sicker and sicker that they have trouble swallowing, or they have trouble manipulating the things that might be necessary to administer the medicine. So you have to be assured that that's going to work. There are people who neurologic disease who there was a case in California about people with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, who were losing their strength in their hands, and therefore, because of that disability, they were having difficulty being able to access the law. And you have to find 2 healthcare providers who will support you. We are really lucky in this valley in that we have providers who will support you. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to bring this conversation forward with your healthcare provider before you ever need it. And ask your provider, would you be willing to support me in this decision if I make this choice? And by that, are you willing to either prescribe for me or help me access people who will provide for me? How it is so common that people will try to initiate that conversation or think they've already had the conversation, and when push comes to shove, the provider says, no, I don't do that. And so I think it's important to be really clear about what your request is. And again, we have been extremely fortunate in up and down the Meadow Valley that there have been providers who have been willing to support their patients who are interested in using this as an option. So the timeline. Just last year, there were several changes that were made to the law. The reason the changes were made were about access. They were about trying to improve access for people who wanted the ability to use this. We have seen a huge increase. I mean, huge is relative, but it's still a very small percent of the population who makes this choice, who chooses to hasten their death. But the number of people has gone. In 2008, I think there were like 60 people who used the law. When I started as a volunteer, there were about 180. That was in 2014. Last year, there were close to 1,000 people who were accessing the law in the state of Washington. But access can be a problem, and oftentimes people don't get their ducks in a row around this issue until the last minute. They don't consider it. They don't go through the steps necessary. There's so much to do when you're really sick. There's so much that takes up your time and your energy and your spirit. And you want to be spending it doing things like focusing on making connections with your family, with people who you care about, with spending time with the people you love. Maybe finding that brother that you've lost track of, maybe connecting with a sister who you haven't seen in a million years. Doing this work is focusing on the end point, and that is really hard for people. And so lots of times, it's only when the suffering becomes so great that you can't avoid thinking about it. It's narrowed your world. You can't, you're thinking about your pain rather than being with your person you love, that people consider this choice and actually act on it. And just recently, I was working with a family who had the conversation with one another. They hadn't had the conversation with their healthcare providers. And then things started to fall apart like dominoes. Everything was coming apart. And they really wanted to do this. They had to find providers. They had to go through the paperwork. They had to get familiar with what the process is. And in the end, the person had a very difficult death with a lot of pain. Ended up losing that sense of him. He didn't want to be sedated, but that's what was necessary to control his pain. And he was not able to take advantage of the law because of that. But they have tried to shorten the process, and so they've gone from 15 days to 7 days. You have to make a clear request to a provider saying, I want to access Washington's Death with Dignity law. But we now use the term medical aid in not dying because there's a lot of ways to die with dignity, and this is far from the only one. But that's what it's called on the books, is the Death with Dignity law. So I want to access Washington's death with dignity law. And you make that clear request, it gets recorded in your chart, and that is day 1 of the 7 days now. You identify for your provider. The law used to be only physicians and osteopaths who could prescribe and function in this role. It's been expanded to APRNs and physician's assistants, and this is a huge benefit to access in rural areas. And in our community, it's been great. Then they have to be assessed, and the 2 providers have to confirm that you're eligible and go through all that checklist and make sure that you meet all the criteria. And then you have to submit a written request to your prescribing provider. And then you have to make a second oral request. And the second oral request says, yes, I want you to send the prescription. I want to follow through with this. I want you to send the prescription to the pharmacy. Usually that ends the process. And what that means is that at that point, you can leave that prescription there until you're ready to use it. You don't have to pay for the there is virtually no insurance company that pays for end-of-life medication, this type of end-of-life medication. So it's coming out of your pocket. We are fortunate to have you need to send it to a compounding pharmacy, the only compounding pharmacy available right near to us, not available to us, but that's right near to us, is in Wenatchee at the hospital. It happens to be the head pharmacist there is supportive of people who are doing this, and it's cheaper there than it is anywhere else in the state. That doesn't mean it's cheap. It still costs about $600. But in the scheme of things, everywhere else it's between $750, $800, sometimes $900. So we're fortunate. Another way we're fortunate. So most people leave it there. We tell people to leave it there until they're ready to use it, because they may never want to use it. They may just want to know it's there, know that they can use it if they want to.
Betsy,
Yes.
are people living here having to go to Wenatchee to pick it up?
It's now can be mailed. I think they're sending it by FedEx. But in general, most people go to have someone go pick it up.
But somebody else can pick it up.
Someone else can pick it up. There again, first of all, you don't want it sitting around the house. It's not like your milk of magnesia. Yeah. So, but yes, other people, you just need to designate somebody who can do it. Next. This is the combination of drugs that are used. There are massive doses of drugs, and it has to be given through the GI tract. It can be given rectally or orally, but that's the combination. I believe it's helpful to have somebody who's been through this to help you go through this, and to access somebody like me, a volunteer. You can sign up with End of Life Washington and be assigned a volunteer to help guide you through the process. I'm going to say 2 words about voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. This is just what it sounds like. It's stopping eating and drinking in order to hasten your death. And why would you do that? There are many illnesses that don't meet the criteria for medical aid in dying. Dementia doesn't. Some chronic degenerative diseases don't. There are a variety of illnesses that may not be considered terminal, or may not qualify you for using medical aid in dying. If in your own mind your suffering is great enough, or you're anticipating suffering that will be great enough, an option is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. This is not an easy thing to do. It really demands support by people who are around you and hopefully your healthcare providers. In most places, having a hospice at some point in the process will participate because someone who's not eating and drinking will die. It can take between 7 and 14 days. And if you're, it sometimes astounds me how long people can, when somebody's not eating, how long they can live. They can live, and just having little sips of water and a little ice chips. And I don't know if there's some other process that goes on or what, but if you really have to have no water in order for this to happen within that time frame. And that's hard. It's hard for your caregivers. It's hard for you. It takes a lot of commitment. If you are interested in it and interested in learning more about it, there's a great website in the Northwest VSED group. I think it's on.
It's in the resource book.
It's in the resource book. There you go. So the resource book is out there. It was put together by this terrific group of people, and I'm happy to talk to you about it individually. I think it takes a lot of commitment and support. Okay, I think I just did my time. We're gonna have time for questions at the end?
Or right now.
No, I think, yeah, you've got a couple minutes.
Okay, anybody have questions?
In the Death with Dignity, you talked about talking to your primary care physician early on. Can that even occur before you're diagnosed with a terminal illness?
I would encourage you to talk with them. Yeah, if this is something you would even consider, asking them about their feelings about participating is well worth it. And
that gets in your medical chart, that qualifies for that?
no, that won't qualify for the
Okay.
first oral request.
Okay.
But what it does is allow you to plan a little
Yeah.
bit, because if you're counting on that person being your advocate or helping you through this, and they don't want anything to do with it. One of the things about the law is that no one is required to participate as a medical provider or a pharmacist or nurse or hospice. So, although of interest, on the west side, what is happening now is because it's been so hard to keep up with the volume of requests for volunteer physicians, what has happened in the past is End of Life Washington would provide a volunteer provider to, if you don't have your own provider who will help you. And it's been hard to keep up with that volume with volunteers. So what has happened is the responsibility has begun to be shifted to hospices. And hospices are taking this on incredibly gracefully. It's really been heartening to, and then you have people who are caring for you in an ongoing way, standing by you around this decision. And I think that has a lot of power.
Where's the closest hospital for the Spokane?
Right, as I think many of you know, we are hospice deficient at the moment. We're not anticipating that to go on indefinitely, but it is a real problem for now. What palliative care, Okanagan Palliative Care, and other people like the Lookout Coalition have tried to do is to support people in the ways that we can, but it's not the same. And no one pretends that it is. And it hasn't been able to take on this kind of responsibility. So right now, I recently had a person who elected to leave the valley and go stay with a friend in Wenatchee and have hospice there. I think there's hospice in Chelan, but Okanagan County, and there is hospice in Okanagan County, it's just pretty anemic right now.
Staffing. Is it profit or non-profit?
Yeah, Sheila would like me to make it clear that the issue is not lack of will, it's a lack of staff. And yeah, I believe that it's important for us as a community to think about what we would like to see happen in the future with hospice. But
Is there a reason that dementia or Alzheimer's is not included?
it's because at the point when you have a 6-month prognosis with those two, with dementia, you're not capable of making an informed decision about taking these meds. So it's how the disease progresses in terms of mortality and cognitive function.
So in that vein, if you are a designated healthcare power of attorney or proxy, or maybe you have chosen one for yourself, does that proxy have any authority to do any of this on behalf of
No,
the-
there's no, what would you call it?
You can't pass it on to somebody.
Yeah, you can't give that right to somebody else. Bruce?
So Betsy, on the threshold of, cognitive impairment, who certifies that? Because that could be a tricky threshold.
That's a good question. There is if the two healthcare providers are concerned that the person does not have the ability or might not have the cognitive ability to judge whether they want to use the law, then there is the option of using a mental health professional to make that assessment. Otherwise, it's the providers who make the assessment. And again, they're not having to be. They're not doing mental status exams on you. They're not doing you're not testing your serial 7s. It's about whether you understand the implications of what you're doing. And for the most part, the providers can assess that as they do their assessment. But it's a good point. You can, and the backup plan is to get a mental health professional to do it.
I think we're at time, but.
Okay. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Betsy, and we're gonna bring up Bo Frosher, who is a deaf doula. She's gonna talk about what is a deaf doula.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I do not have fancy slides. I have my little notebook here, so sorry if I look down at my notebook. Probably, has anyone ever heard of a deaf doula? How about a birth doula? Right, so that, it's kind of it's deaf doula seems it's kind of a new thing, years, I don't know how many years, but a deaf doula is similar to a birth doula in that we help move a person through a very important transition, one that we all are going to do at some time. Birth is the one side of the wheel, it's the beautiful, happy side, and death is the other side that can also be beautiful, but also difficult and devastating and sad. I was drawn to be a deaf doula just because I was lucky enough to have experiences with home vigils and home funerals when I was in my 20s working at a Waldorf school. And I saw that, oh my gosh, like death could be and is natural and could be a beautiful part of our community. And then when my mother died and then my father died, I was just so really taken with the hospice people and the caretakers who were so beautiful and helped me so much that's why I was drawn to do this work. And it's really a step into the unknown. There's a couple different training programs you can do. One is called Sacred Crossings, and the other one is called Going with Grace, and that's the one I did in 2020. I meant to do it in person, but it was COVID, so I was online, and it was really interesting. But deaf doulas, as Betsy was talking about medical aid in dying, I did just recently be with a person who chose that. And really, deaf doulas serve and work for the dying person. And oftentimes a family member might call me because they need support and they need somewhere to go and at least someone to talk to. But really the death doula's mission is to serve the dying person and talk with them about their wishes and their desires and support them in any way that they need. The one thing that death doulas are not, we are not a medical, we are totally non-medical. We just provide spiritual and emotional, practical, physical, any kind of support for the terminally ill patient or the terminally ill person or the family involved. And in general, death doulas work with people who are terminally ill. I have done some work with people who have died unexpectedly, but it's different. It's different. Death doulas are trained to have that support for people that are dying. The one thing people ask, like, what in the world does a death doula do? You know, and what we do is what the patient, the person, and the people want. That could be a myriad of things. Yeah, we try to normalize healthcare by creating spaces to hold those conversations with the well-being of the family. And then when individuals who are dying and their plan for death, they have autonomy over their plan for death. And that just creates a safer, as Betsy was talking about, more relaxed atmosphere to this huge thing that's happening to them and to their family. So death doulas in general just provide compassionate death care. And I'm going to go through a number of things that how we can serve people. We can create an advanced care directive, or most likely there's other people that can do that for the dying person, but we can lead them in that direction. Explore the meaning of, you know, most of the work I've done has been talking with people, hearing stories, maybe even helping create their legacy, and what that looks like to them. Develop a plan. We can develop a plan for if they are going to choose to die at home. What do they want that to look like? How can we support that plan? How can we include the family members in that plan? And it's a balancing act between what the family members sometimes want and what the dying person wants. So we are that advocate for the dying person. And, you know, I haven't done this yet with a client or a patient, but, you know, a death doula can help initiate a home funeral or a home vigil and be there if the person chooses to die at home. And so then normalizing and not encouraging, but normalizing ways that we are with the dead and dying, because it's not something that many people are used to being around. So how do we touch them? How do we move them? How do we speak to them? How do we, whatever the patient wants. And so that is a very intimate thing to be involved with both the family and the dying person. We can also assist in obviously in the burden, to ease burden of the caregivers. So we might give respite to the family, or take part in sitting with the person and just give space for the family. Really, you know, we're trained to do all of these things, and my experience has just been listening and being with the family and the dying person, and they will tell me what I need to do. It's not that the death doula is coming in saying we need to do this and this and this. No, it's more about listening and being curious and being open and accepting whatever people's spiritual or desires are for their death. It is support. And my teacher would say this to me, like, when you go and visit a person, you have to have a strong back and a soft heart. So it's not a death doula doesn't have any opinions about way things should be done. We are there to support the dying in their wishes and their caregivers. And one of the most important things too, besides that though, that's been the main thing that I've really found in my work. But because there are so many other resources, but of course a death doula can be connected with the funeral director or estate planner or lawyers and guide the family to other resources of which we have here in the Metau. Death doulas can also perform, celebrations of life if the family chooses. But again, for me, it simply comes down to listening, being with the person, hearing the family, and being a support to whatever their wishes are, and providing education or going to find out the answers that you don't know, and helping out like a midwife would do when someone was birthing. It's, again, a midwife when someone is dying and moving on. And it is the great unknown. So I don't go in with answers. I go in with questions and love and curiosity, and just leaving everything else behind. I have this great quote that came from my teacher, and it says, "This work is about trusting the individual to know how to die, and trusting yourself. This work is about compassion, supporting with the alleviation of suffering. This work is about intuition, your own keen and quick insight about people, places, and circumstances. This work is about boundaries, knowing how far you can and will go. This work is about communication, which sometimes means not saying anything at all. This work is about emotions. This work is about curiosity. This work is about our relationship with the unknown. This work is about love." Any questions?
Got a question back here.
Yeah.
So as a death doula, are you sort of like selected by the individual and the family ahead of time and consider yourself sort of like on call, like when somebody might be nearing the end?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, you're on call for whatever they may need.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is it generally like you're spending just the last potential few moments, or is it sometimes more like days or
weeks, because you're planning things with them and getting to know them and talking with the family, right? I found a lot of times people want their story to be heard. They want to speak, and also do the family members and the caregivers. This is just a huge moment, right? An unknown, devastating moment. And so, yeah, it just depends on what the people want, but it could be weeks until the very end. Yeah.
Does it ever happen where the person kind of recovers and they says, I don't need you anymore?
I haven't had that happen. That would be awesome. Yeah.
So are death doulas ever associated with church?
No, not necessarily. Not at all. I mean, we really support the spiritual practices of the people that we serve, right? But we are non-denominational. But would support, part of the work is supporting the traditions and rituals of the people that we are serving.
So you can work with their minister.
Absolutely. Yes.
I'm aware there can be an awful lot of paperwork involved from before and after death. Are you versed in helping with that?
Yes, I can be. Yes, definitely. Yeah, death certificates and things like that. And if I don't know, I'll find out.
Right. Yeah. Well, transfer things with bank accounts, and
Right.
insurance policies.
Right. If I can't do that, I can help someone that would help do that, like find an estate planner or a lawyer. Someone who would help do that. Yeah.
You're a professional, correct? You're not a volunteer, are you?
I would consider myself a professional, but I charge a fee of what it's worked out with the client.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a service.
About how much?
Depends on how long
Yeah,
it is.
let's-
Yeah, like 500 to 1,000 depending on the time frame. But
Is this something relatively new? Just because 20 years ago, something,
Yeah.
I took a class to be a caregiver.
Yeah.
And there was nothing.
yeah, I think it is relatively new. I mean, I got,
And
Mhm.
thinking back of the people I took care of, if I'd known this,
right.
it would have been better for them and the family.
It is relatively new,
Yes.
5, 6, 7 years, Susie, something like that.
It depends where, in California,
depends
it's
where.
probably 20
Yeah.
years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, it just
you know.
has become more, I think,
Yeah.
mainstream
So
as
needed.
we,
It
right,
is,
right.
isn't it?
Yep.
I just think back, oh, if you'd done this. and that.
Yeah, yeah. right. We don't
Stay with them.
normalize it a little bit because
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
Are there many deaf doulas in the valley?
There's myself, Susie K over here, Tony Kubina, who I think has been at the last few, and there's a few more, I think, yeah, and a couple in training, so, yeah.
Can you suggest a resource for finding other deaf doulas around the state?
It's the National Association of Deaf Doulas, I can give you that information, yeah, they are a lot around the state, for sure, yes.
Well, what's that like with the boundaries in that interface between family and the dying person when their wishes aren't allowed?
I haven't had that
Okay,
experience.
right.
But if I was to have that experience, my heart would be and my strength would be with the dying person.
Right.
And yeah, it's really, just the work that I have done hasn't had that involved, but it still is very emotional and very intense for me. And so, but I mean, strong back, soft heart, you go in and support that person. Yeah. It does happen,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. Thank you. My information is in here too, if you have any further questions or want more resources.
We're gonna take a quick 5-minute break, so feel free to get up and move your body, use the
Are you doing the training? Yeah, because Kathy. There's a lady here. I met her at the recycle place first. What can you say? But she was happy. Well, there we go.
I just thought it might be nice. I have access to all sides.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for staying with us. And yeah, we have something hot off the press that we have been working hard on, and Jocelyn's gonna tell you all about it.
My name is Jocelyn, and I was a nurse here in the community for almost 25 years. And I would have loved to have had something like this to pass out. if you are in a health crisis or have someone you know or someone in family who's in a health crisis, this is gonna give you resources for everything that we've talked about over these 3 days, 3 separate sessions. So it's got beautiful artwork that Tracy did. We spent maybe 6 months putting this together.
It was a long time. Thank you, Darla.
And
There were a
Darla
lot of
printed it
editing
for us.
sessions.
So we just got it today, so we're really happy to share this with you. And there are some out on the table.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I am going to be talking to you about home funerals and the home vigil. And I really love this quote: "Home funerals empower families and friends to begin the beautiful journey of mending the tear in the fabric of their community that is caused when someone they love dies." And so go ahead and go to the next slide. I first became aware of like the power of a funerary custom, because I was in New Zealand. I was in this small little village, and this 42-year-old man had a heart attack and he died very suddenly. And he had already spoken to the Queen of the Marae, because it was a very strong Maori community. And he said, if something happens to me, please, I really want the traditional tangi ceremony. And that's a 3-day vigil. And so I was in this village, and it was just like, yeah, talk about a tear in the fabric. And unfortunately, I've experienced that in my own life with sudden death. And it was like this whole village just came together in this incredible way to support the movement of his spirit, to support the family who was going through this loss. And it was so beautiful. After 3 days, the family was blown away. They didn't know actually that much about Maori tradition. They were from the city, but they were up there in this village, and just the like incredible generosity of spirit was just so palpable. Food was just coming in and out of their long house for those 3 days. The talking stick and the stories were just going 24 hours a day for 48 hours. And so the family just had a chance to like listen and have this time, because as Bo was saying, birth and death and those thresholds, there's something so poignant in those moments. And a lot of times, if we're not prepared for them in any way, we can just get swept into such a vortex of stress and of just chaos and confusion. And so for me, it made me realize, wow, to have a whole cultural container around that threshold, it affected me. And so I unfortunately, when I had lost loved ones unexpectedly, I didn't have my ducks completely in a row, and I actually didn't wind up being able to do that vigil that I had wanted to do, in part because there's rules in the county and there's ways of doing things, and it can be challenging. And so that's why we're having this conversation about it. And I just wanted to show a video of a family on the East Coast who were able to go through and do a home funeral for their mom. So we'll watch this for 7 minutes and come back.
My mom was unconditionally loving, period. Exclamation mark, exclamation. She just, when you walked into the room, you knew through the look on her face that you lit up her world. And she would just stretch her arms out and be so loving of who you were and how you looked and what you were doing. And you could be doing not much of anything monumental, and she would just fill you with that you would leave her feeling good about yourself. With their mother's unconditional love as inspiration, Fran and her family embarked on a journey. They decided to care for their dying mother at home, surrounded by those who loved her. Monique Pauline Martel died May 17, 2013. The family's final testament to their mother was to care for her body on their own. I can't imagine having the body whisked away, and that's it. And then you go to see them all made up in a funeral parlor, and you get to spend 2 hours and then you leave them. The thought of leaving them in someone else's care would be difficult for me. Home funerals are intimate and personal. Yes, there are rules and regulations to follow, paperwork to be done, decisions to be made, but it's the families who decide how and when they want to grieve. For Fran and her family, the sacred space was gathered from present and past. It wasn't one thing that we did that made it feel right for us. It was many things, using essential oils, pulling out photo albums, reflecting on their life and what it meant. It's almost like having them in your space. It is a sacred space. Everything that you're doing becomes part of that. Even daily tasks become a chance to think about the past, whether it's while doing the dishes or holding a handmade blanket or when lovingly caring for the body. And I do recall washing her hands in between each of the fingers and looking at her hands as there's no other pair like it. And I think it's just because there's no other woman like her. She was our mom, and they provided so much love. After Fran's mother passed, family members of all ages, some from as far away as Hawaii, came to help and to pay their respects. With their grandmother in the next room, travel-weary teens could nap outdoors and then visit and grieve at their own pace. A home funeral helped them feel comfortable with death as part of life. The edge of having a dead person in the house became a natural process, and the weirdness of it lessened, and it became really, in our eyes, a gift that we gave the kids. Death is not something to be so fearful about. It is a natural part, and it wasn't long for them that they saw their niece being born. Not actually there, but I mean, 1 month someone passed away, and then within a month, someone's born. The impact had to be there for them, that this is all part of life. They also enjoyed decorating of the coffin. You'd run out and go grab beautiful markers, sparkles and things like that. We chose to use a symbol that my dad had created called God is Love, so that in a way he was part of the whole process. Someone decided to use the infinity symbol, which is kind of like the number 8, and then that kind of caught on with the group. That got them involved in the process of honoring their grandparents. It's a little racy because you feel like you're being naughty and doing what you're doing, but yet once you realize that it is okay to do, the state allows it, and you come to terms with, okay, this is the approach we're taking. It's not the norm. It's a little outlandish, a little, you're willing to face the tune of some people looking at you and saying, my God, you have lost it. And quite the contrary, you feel you've gained so much. Fran's sister Sue was present for every step of the journey. They laughed together, and they cried together. They were a team, especially during this final act of love. Bringing my mom's body from the house, it definitely is taking a whole nother step of letting go of her and then placing her into the van. And now we're starting the procession, what you would call a procession, to the crematorium. So you're really empowered in every sense of that word. You're so empowered that you're pulling this off, that you're on this whole new adventure with your parent, with your loved one, and accomplishing it and giving them, from their toes up through your body, that feeling of giving them the best gift, or giving even yourself the best gift, knowing that you've done the best that you can do for them, was an incredible feeling.
So, yeah, I thought, let's watch something, because it brings it to life in a different kind of way to see what we are talking about. And so, as I said in the video, there are rules, there are laws and regulations. According to the state, we all do have the right to be our own funeral directors. And we do have the right to be with our loved ones, especially for those first 24 hours. And then it gets a little hazy after that. You really have to refrigerate your person to like 37.5 degrees, which can be very difficult depending upon the circumstance. And so I've been in numerous conversations with our coroner, Dave Rodriguez, who's just does a wonderful service for our county. And it can be difficult for him as a coroner. There's 2 instances that are the easiest in order to have this experience of that home funeral, or sometimes it's called the home vigil. One is if somebody is already on hospice. So he doesn't need to come when someone dies in that instance. There's another that there's like a physician's list of people whose death is imminent. And so again, when your loved one dies and it's expected, it's a really different kind of a situation. And he's very willing and supportive for people to take that time. And if you did have a situation like that and you wanted 24 hours and maybe you even wanted more, we can talk a little bit about what that might entail later. So the other circumstance is an unexpected death, which is what I've experienced. And that is a lot trickier, to bring your loved one back home, because there's a lot of times where, Dave is going to need to do some sort of he has reports and that he has to do. He has an investigation that he has to do. But River Valley, they recently have bought the Precht Memorial, and they work a lot with families doing home funerals. And so they can help, they could bring somebody back to you, or if they've died in a hospital or somewhere else, they can help with that process so that you could bring somebody back home and have that time with them. And there's also, we do have a woman who has moved to the Valley. She was going to be here tonight, but she actually had to go to a funeral. Her name is Jess Bender. She's not in the resource guide yet because she's just gotten here recently, but she is a funeral director and she has experience with home funerals. And so she is definitely willing to get on the phone with Dave Rodriguez if something did come up and Dave felt like, okay, this is fairly clear cut. If I know that there is gonna be support, I'm not just leaving somebody here, where it could go south in some sort of a way, then he feels, he's gonna feel a lot more secure in saying, okay, you are going to come and help to do this care for this vigil. And so a couple of things to think about. If this is something that you want for your own self, or you want to, do this for a loved one, it is really helpful to have things in writing so that you can say, this is what my person wants, because you are going to have to be ready to advocate, because it's not always super simple. And if you want to do the transportation of your loved one, let's say that they want to go to recompose in Seattle or something like that, you can transport your loved one, but you have to go through the process of getting those permits. And so that's where it can be really helpful to have a death doula on your side, or this woman, Jess Bender, or you call River Valley. Because when you are going through something like this, it is just very, very difficult to think straight, and it's a really important time to get a team to help you through, because your brain really doesn't work in the same way. If this is also an option that speaks to you in some way, there's an amazing website. It's called National Home Funeral Alliance, and they have different courses on doing death care for your loved one. And so you could ask, you could go through some of those online courses yourself. There's also in-person courses. There's an amazing funeral home in Everett that was really laid down. Bo's family that she worked with back in the 90s, it was that woman who really went to bat for that family so that they could bring their loved one home, because it was a lot of times there's religious reasons, there's spiritual reasons. A lot of religions want that full 3-day vigil, and for some, that's not the same. So it's helpful to have somebody that you can call upon to advocate. And I'm trying to remember the name of that funeral home. It's in the resource guide under home funerals, but they also have events, they have classes, things like that. Susie, I think you took a class from her over there.
Char Barrett.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And next one. And here's the National Home Funeral Alliance. So if you just Google that, you can find it. And there's incredible films and books and all kinds of stuff. That website has everything that you need to know. And so the other things to think about, like I talked about, the transportation permits, they do file those at the Department of Health, but you have to have things signed off, by 2 or 3 separate people, and it's not always as easy as it seems. And if you do want to be your own funeral director, then these things have to be done within the 72-hour window. And there's also, if you are allowed to keep your loved one longer, then you'll need these like gel packs and all kinds of stuff to make that happen. Dry ice, unfortunately, dry ice is like not even available anywhere anymore after COVID. I don't know what happened to dry ice, but it's no longer an option. So I've been talking with Jess about what about if we here in our community have somebody that's got the freezer with the gel packs and some of the little cardboard boxes so that we can support each other within our place here. And I think that's it. So, yeah, any questions or? Go.
Who signs the death certificate? I mean, how do you get it done
Well,
if you die at home?
yeah, so
I could,
so physician, if you're on that list already, or the hospice nurse can, a lot of different people can. Dave, Rodriguez, the coroner.
you have to call in and get,
Well, if there's an unexpected death, and let's say that you call 911, Arrow Met House is gonna come, then Dave Rodriguez, the coroner, is going to come. And you are supposed to call, if somebody does die at home, you are supposed to call the coroner.
but if you die in the hospital, it's all done.
A hospital has its own set of things and rules. Sheila, what am I getting
Just
wrong?
to clarify, why, it's not wrong, but, hospice doesn't actually sign the death certificates.
Okay,
Well,
yeah,
typically the death certificate, because they have a medical, we already know they're passing, so that death certificate goes back to the primary physician.
okay,
Whoever that is, and they sign the death certificate,
okay, good to know.
not they.
Okay, good to know.
Is there a law for how long, like, a timeline you have to call the coroners within an hour or something?
It's like the county kind of rule is, it within reason. I mean, because what can happen is suddenly, let's say that you didn't call for 24 hours or something like, it's apparent in that case. And then suddenly it's like, here comes the police are getting involved now. Why have you not, why didn't you report it and that kind of thing. So it is really important to report within a reasonable amount of time.
So if you call the coroner, do you really need to call 911?
Well, if, let's say you don't know if your loved one is deceased, you might, no, you don't need to call 911 if you're like, there is no, okay, I need help here. That's Sheila, back me up.
I think that if we're talking about an unexpected death.
Oh, okay.
So, if it's in an unexpected death, you need somebody to come quickly, and 911 is your usual emergency.
Right. But I was thinking of disease.
Yeah, no, then no, you
If
don't.
you have a chronic illness, where death is expected, even if you have a chronic illness and you don't have a 6-month prognosis, you're not on that list that the coroner has that says your death is imminent. Then you still have to go through the same procedure of an unexpected death. Even if you don't want to be resuscitated, then you've got your pulse form on the refrigerator. But when they come, but usually 911 first, and then they usually are the ones who call the coroner. Actually.
Oh, okay.
Usually, the community members are not the communicators with the coroner.
There's several avenues to get on that list. So if you're a palliative care patient, we expect that you're gonna pass away and you have a pulse form. We call the coroner, we get you on the list. And then when a family calls us and says they're gone, then I call the coroner back. Just let him know.
So if you call 911 and Arrow Met Health comes out, they don't have to take the body, do they?
They don't, no.
Okay.
They don't, but a lot of times, yeah, but if you don't have anything kind of in place, it can be a tricky moment at that moment, and it's easy to kind of lose your.
The obligation of the coroner is to take each death seriously and to evaluate what was the cause of death. Was there foul play?
Right.
Did somebody,
But if that's not in question, then the person dies, you can keep them at home until you're taking them to the cremation place.
each coroner, each county has its own set of rules in the state of Washington. There are some rules like 3 days, or you can be your own that have come from the state, but for the most part, each county has its own set of rules. Our coroner, who is trying to do a big job around a big county, has a whole list of, in an unexpected death, has an obligation to investigate the death. And so, when the death is unexpected, when there has not been a pre-notification that a death is imminent, he has an obligation to do an investigation of some sort. He has to review records, and it's less likely that he's gonna be cool about leaving the body with the family, and that's it.
Yeah, so it's a tricky moment right there. There might be a circumstance where he does make a decision. He said, it can go either way, right? And it's up to his discernment at that moment. And so it does help if you're like, I already have been talking with River Valley. They're expecting us, or Jess Bender, and get her on the phone as well, that kind of thing. That's where I'm saying it helps to have a plan. It helps to know that that's what the person wanted so that you can advocate in those moments for that possibility. And you have to be ready to surrender because it might go either way. Rose?
There's been a movement, along with home funerals. There's been a movement for green burials.
We're gonna hear about it right now.
Oh, good. Because I worked down there at the White Eagle Reserve down in Big County Ranch for a couple of years.
Oh, great.
I wanted to put a plug in for them.
Well, that's perfect because that's our next speaker. Any other questions or thoughts or?
Can I just walk through so that I understand? So you're caring for a loved one, say they have Alzheimer's, but they've established you as their care agent and have said, do not resuscitate. And they've stopped eating and drinking. And they've said previously to this, like onslaught of this disease, that they're gonna stop eating and drinking. So in that scenario, as their care agent and power of attorney, I would want to work with their doctor to say, this is an imminent death situation. And then that, okay. And then that physician would call the coroner?
Correct.
Okay. So then this person has also said, I want to have a home funeral. We're going to keep them for 24 hours. And so when that person passes, I call the coroner, and the coroner knows that person's name. I say this person's name. They're on the imminent death list. That coroner says, okay, nobody needs to come.
So sometimes.
Or you could call the physician.
Depending what your funeral plans are, or your body disposition plans are. Sometimes that is the person who notifies the coroner. So you want to make as few phone calls as you have to make in that situation, because as Tracy says, you want to focus on caring for your person and grieving your person. So if ahead of time the agreement is that you're taking them to Riverside, or you're taking them to, or they're going to Seattle to get composted. You know ahead of time whether they will be calling the coroner or they want you to.
The physician will.
Your first call is to whoever's gonna manage the body after you.
Funeral home.
Okay, so
whatever funeral home that is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you call them, that'll be the first question, is are you on the coroner's list? And then they can call the coroner.
They can call the coroner and they will deal with calling the physician too, notifying the physician. And you may wanna notify the physician if you've got a relationship with that person.
But if you're, like my friend was saying, if I'm the funeral director, like I've chosen to do an at-home funeral, because this is what we're
remember,
thinking.
when you say an at-home funeral, you have to dispose of the body in some way.
Okay, yes.
In the state of Washington does not allow you to bury your body on your own land. and you can't incinerate it yourself.
Right,
So, that means that someone else is gonna get involved.
so we've already made the plan with that place where, okay.
Right,
And
right.
then-
And so that's where it's helpful because let's say that you're mostly doing everything yourself, but you could still have River Valley file all your paperwork for you.
Okay,
But you don't necessarily have to release your person straight to them. According to what they said to me, they can help you get your
yeah,
transportation permit filed
okay,
so that you can then move your person to their next
gotcha.
place. Does that make sense?
Okay, I think so.
It sounds like you're gonna work with the physician in a situation like that. You'll work with the physician and it can be helpful to get the funeral home or a doula,
Yeah,
in this,
totally.
in this
Well,
case.
Right, because regardless of where the funeral is, if it's at home or anywhere else, there always has to be disposition of the body. So there has to be a funeral home involved in that because
Well, it
you can't do
depends.
that
I mean, it depends because if you go to recompose in Seattle or you want a burial at sea or you want, something else that's in Spokane or something like that, you do have the right to transport your loved one and you don't necessarily have to hire a funeral home to do that for you, but you can.
But is
You
the
can.
composting place technically a funeral home? Yeah.
I don't know what they call themselves. Probably they call themselves, I'm sure they have.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the intricacies of how that all exactly works, but yeah.
Okay.
I think how am I doing on my time?
And,
Coco.
are you gonna talk anything about those things like the Neptune people and all that?
We're not gonna talk about Neptune Society. That is an option, and they will come. And that's a cremation option that you prepay into. The other main crematory is, River Valley has a crematory. That's the closest option. But we are gonna be hearing from Phoebe and Susie about, okay, mostly Phoebe, about the natural burial option. And I really recommend if you are interested in understanding what your other options are for, your final resting place. If you look in here,
Where are those?
they're on the front
Oh,
desk.
great.
And there's a lot of different options, but the great place to look is Cascade Natural Burials website. And they have a lot of options. And then we also do in here as well. I think it's under disposition. It is. So you can, and I don't have actually Neptune in here, but I've got the local options and the Cascade Natural Burial website that you can check out. So.
But I have heard that it's really, really hard to get copies of your death certificate.
I
not hard to
didn't
get-
find that.
Shouldn't be. It's not hard to get copies of your death certificate but it's much easier to get them at the time of death, not try to get
Yes.
them multiple.
Get
times.
extra. Yeah, I got extra at that time because yes, it can be difficult later. But yeah. And make sure you read the fine print because there were some things that didn't match up there. It needs to be correct. So anyway,
This is back a ways, but we always said a minimum of 6.
yeah, I think I got 9 or something like that. And I have like 1 or 2 left. So, because there's a lot of places where you're not thinking you're gonna have to,
Life insurance, there's all
all kinds of stuff.
banks, everybody wants.
The one thing I do want to say that was so helpful for me when I lost, it's coming on to 3 years ago, lost my ex-husband and father of my children. Somebody said to me, so much can wait. Like you don't need to figure everything out. right now. And that was really helpful. But I also had Bo who was advocating for me, and it's really helpful to have people on your team that are watching out for you. And Betsy too, who's there too. So, okay.
So, coming in the back, you take responsibility for me when I talk too fast to go like this, and when I talk too quiet to do this. Okay,
I'll do that.
I'm good at both too fast and too quiet. So I'm just here to talk about Cascades Natural Burial. We are a little group, we're like a club, we're not a nonprofit. There's not that many of us, but our roots are deep. And Susie's been involved in an effort to create a natural burial ground in the Methow Valley for many years. And we have some pretty good momentum going. And that's partly why I'm here today, to keep that momentum. Before I say anything else, I want to read our mission. Our mission is to conserve open space by establishing a natural burial ground in the Methow Valley and to promote the practice of natural burial through education, advocacy, and community partnerships. And that's what we're doing right now. This is a perfect last talk of your ducks in a row. Could get any more last than this. We've gone together, like once a month, every 2 months for several years now, and we've learned a lot, and we want to share that with everybody. There's a really nice sheet here that Michelle Easton, who unfortunately is leaving, made kind of frequently asked questions. And I hope that all of you will take a copy of that is up front and take that with you. And we have a really nice website, as was previously mentioned. And let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So what is natural burial? What is everything that unnatural burial is not? And nowhere in the United States do you have to have a casket or have embalming. Neither of those are required, but each cemetery can make their own rules. And so one of the rules we have not been able to work our way around is the requirement for a concrete vault. And part of that, the cemetery board members who I've talked to say what they object to is they don't want their cemetery to collapse. They don't want there to be dents for mowing mostly. And I'm not going to go into that anymore. Anyway, moving on. Next slide, please. So the problems are, pretty obvious. Unsustainable. A lot of people talk about burial in general as being unsustainable because we're already using up enough land with all these dead people, and then the population is growing, and we'll have even more dead people and less land. But I'd say the other way around. This is an opportunity for those of us who don't have pieces of property to donate to the public good, to establish like a 10-foot by 10-foot plot and say, this is mine, and maybe family members around in a pretty place and have a little sacred space that you can go and think about your family and so on. So burial in general is not unsustainable, but conventional burial is unsustainable because of the resource consumption, the pesticides, the lawnmower, I mentioned that, and the byproducts, and also this idea of committing land to a single use. The cemeteries are just for cemeteries. One of the cemeteries where Rolls has worked has a camp, right? Near it, there's a camp and there's trails and public access. And, yeah, so it's not just a cemetery. So just cemeteries are nice too, actually. Okay, it's like alternatives. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm all about natural burial, but intensification means like if we're running out of space, should we start stacking bodies? It might happen. Cremation. Honestly, I bet most of us in this room, if we were to die tomorrow, would end up getting cremated. Because unfortunately, right now, there's no option for natural burial that doesn't require transporting a body a pretty far distance. And it is also more expensive. than cremation. Cremation is still kind of quick and easy, but it's not as ecologically sound as many of us have thought or that I thought for a long time. And it does require an agency and a facility to do it for you. Aquamation and human composting are all the rage, but my test is that those are urban constructs. We have like human composting. Well, green burial is human composting. We have the land to do it naturally. We don't need a building and a vessel and a company to do it for us. Burial at sea, that would be cool, but, and then natural burial. So natural burial, obviously, no embalming, which is not required anyway. Everything's biodegradable, not even any screws, in a casket. And no vault, of course. And it's what the majority of humans on Earth do, and what we all did until not very long ago. It's not, and natural burial is the new old thing, right? And it's more environmentally sound. Sequesters carbon. I think we would argue, somebody could argue that one, so I'm not going to talk about it. I really like this, the last act, as green as possible. Like, imagine, we try to, we recycle and we're trying to be so ecologically sound, and then we die and all this industry just gets, put into place and driving around with caskets and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, it is the most natural last act. And then the idea of multifunctional green spaces, I imagine it, imagine a spot in Valley on a shelf somewhere. There's kind of a view and a road, and you can go up there and just hang out. It's a nice concept. So going back to our deep roots with Susie's efforts back in the day, basically, they tried really hard at one point to get Beaver Creek to do something, and it didn't work out, and there's problems there. But ultimately, where they drew the line was the thing about the concrete vaults. And so you can get buried in either of these cemeteries without a casket, without embalming, but you still have to have a concrete vault, and that's what the disabled Ken White, the disabled were trying to, follow Ken White's wishes for a natural burial, and came up against the concrete vault thing, and that's what started the whole effort again to establish a natural burial conservation ground in the valley. Next. There we are, me and Susie, and this is at Earth Day, and we have a little booth and handouts and stuff, and we just want everybody to know about this because we're passionate that it could happen. We just need to get it out to everybody. There's Ken Evans. He's modeling a wicker casket that I made. Not only did he do that, he wrote a song about green burial, bury me in the woods. So we actually we are a deeply an organization with our own theme song. But our hurdles, community support. We have a lot of support in the community. Everybody likes the idea. Cemetery operation and startup costs. Well, like we've talked about in other contexts, River Valley Funeral Home have been really great to talk to about this. They want to be like the hippest, most progressive, most flexible. They'll do it all for you. The whole, just like you would with a conventional funeral home. Or they'll do whatever part you want. Like if someone died at home, they could take the body away briefly and bring it back. They could leave it with you if it all worked out. They could let you literally dig the hole. Back on that, I'm digging a hole. It doesn't have to be that deep. I don't know if everybody knows that. It only has to be 3.5 feet deep. You want to be in the organic part of the soil where all the bacteria is. And so it's not that hard to dig. Like you could send your son-in-laws up there to go start digging while you're at hospice. But River Valley is really into the idea. Like if we had land, which is going to be my big push right now, we had land, they could do like licensing, and they already have licenses, they already have a funeral home and they already have a cemetery. They could do the permitting, they could, you know, they interact with the coroner and hospice, they're really good at all that. So they're ready to step up. They've said all the right things about this, and I have no reason to think that it's not true. So as far as cemetery operation and startup cost, the big hurdle is land. There's no way we're gonna buy a piece of land. It's too expensive. It's too much for our little fledgling group of 8 of us or something, right? But I really believe that the more we talk about it, the more likely it is that we will find a donor of land. Because this is land that can be not used for anything else. It can be, you know, kind of like, preferably not too rocky, because that's sort of hard on the brothers-in-laws that are digging the hole. But just, you know, like a bench somewhere would be perfect. And, you know, 10 to 25 acres is not that much land for this scale, you know. The Met Hall is perfect because we have land. We have this really well-educated population of people. We have like a lot of people ready to access this service. Sorry. So, you know, and they're educated and they've got a little money, you know, and I really think too, back to the startup cost, if we got the land, we could start pre-selling plots. That's a time-honored tradition to raise money to run cemeteries, is to pre-sell plots. I mean, I would buy one, you bet. To know that that's where I would get buried, and it's a pretty spot, and it's kind of a little dirt road, and maybe a shed to put the wheelbarrow in, and you know, it just seems really nice. So that's what. So the kind of land, ideally, you kind of read that 5 to 20 acres, level or gently sloping, not too rocky. Native vegetation. Oh, that's another thing. A piece of property would, you know, we probably wouldn't, you know, landscape it. We're not going to put in a lawn. But it would be like there'd be some fire control, you know, fire mitigation changes, you know, or maybe it's a piece of land that's gotten kind of trashed and it needs to be rehabbed. And so like noxious weeds and fire, I think that would be part of the deal. So, and that would be an appeal to somebody that had like a big piece of property and they wanted to give it to the general good, and that they would know that that little piece was being well managed. And then obviously, a view would be really nice, not in the floodplain, not near water. We don't need the water. It's not going to be agricultural land or land that's going to be useful for something else. Year-round access, but like I said, a dirt road that can be plowed would be enough. If it was even more accessible, that's fine. And then this is the dream, connected to the trail system besides. That'd be really nice, you know. And somebody wrote cell service here, but I don't know. No, I don't think you need that really, so.
I think Betsy wrote that.
Yeah, right? Was that a question about winter?
Yeah. Frozen land.
Well, all cemeteries have that problem, right? A lot of, the convention is to dig a hole and fill it with like straw or something. And then you may not get your first choice spot because you died in the winter unexpectedly. But someone said that on the res, they just put some tires out and burn them until the dirt melts and then scrape it all off. Is that a mean thing to say? I was quoting somebody else. So, and so I guess, I mean, that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. I really want to say is all of you probably know people that have thought about giving land like to the Conservancy and or to other public use. And I just want to plant the seed in people's minds that, wow, you could do something really cool and different and that was beneficial to the community in perpetuity. So I hope that you'll continue to go out and talk about this yourselves.
I wasn't talking about the land digging the hole so much as when you've got 6 feet of snow on the whole area.
Oh, yeah, well, I guess we hope the cemetery is, the burial ground is not too far away, but that could be a challenge, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that you would probably need to pre-think.
Well, I think the guys at River Valley would be helpful in those instances.
they've indicated that they would, probably, if we had the land, that they would probably have a machine. And we might need a little covered area for a machine, so if we needed that in the winter, they could do that. They mentioned that at one point anyway, so.
I mean, if it had power, then they could actually build a facility with a cooler so that someone could die at home, be transported to the cooler, so that you'd have time to have the family come or whatever, like if you did want to do a home funeral. And then you could go directly from the cooler to your gravesite and never have to go to OMAC. Yeah.
So you would have to determine this land to be a cemetery, because she said you can't just.
Right, and that's where River Valley would be really helpful in helping us set that up. But it's a conservation land, conservation burial land. It's the same kind of land trust as the Conservancy. And people have asked, is the Conservancy interested or how are they involved? And I'd say they've got too much going on right now with their newest land acquisitions. And but I think if we had land and we needed their expertise in doing the legalities of transferring it from whoever's donating it into a trust, that they would step up and help us with that. And the Okanagan Conservancy also has shown some interest.
So,
Barbara.
So if, the cemetery is stuck on the concrete vault, why couldn't it be a piece of the cemetery land that's just left in a more natural state where they don't have to mow?
Take it away, Susie.
Well, we got metaphorically lynched for that idea.
Oh.
We offered it as part of the Beaver Creek Cemetery, and people just went crazy.
Oh.
A few families went, and came to a meeting and gave us, once over.
So they really want to do something.
They don't feel like, they think those cement vaults are really important. And as they put it, anything else was an abomination.
Oh.
News to me, but wasn't worth the fight.
I agree.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say that this space that we're envisioning and hoping for could also be a really appropriate ash scattering location. And
would you have traditional markers on the graves?
that's a good question. Most of the green burials, cemeteries, or burial grounds have like flat ones on the ground.
Right,
Yeah.
right, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
The flat,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't have markers.
You don't have to, you could just do GPS coordinates if you wanted to, but yeah. But what if the people who decided to get this together had their hearts set on markers, bigger markers, that could happen too, but we hope.
So are there, it seems like on the other sites in Washington, there's a minimum area around each bond that's required, so like how many plots do you envision or, let's say 10 acres?
Well, that is addressed in the fact sheet,
Oh, okay.
but also, they're saying 10 by 10 feet, but it depends on the terrain, because you could have a whole, you could have like a 50-acre shelf that only has 10 acres that are diggable. You could have little rocky outcroppings and gullies and things, so it'd be really natural like that too. It would vary a lot. Yes.
At White Eagle, we didn't have many manufactured headstones. There were some people that wanted something, and we put a boulder or stone or something, a natural stone, and that could be engraved on. It was kind of not even noticeable if you didn't know what you were looking for.
That's
cool. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
I noticed some when I was there, just a small stone with somebody's name on it.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
And it could be buried in a shroud.
Yeah.
People came up from California sometimes.
Yeah.
Long trips to get there.
Whoa, sorry.
So could someone plant a tree on the grave?
That's yes, except that you have to water it, and we don't want it to be burdensome, to the community. So, yeah.
But maybe it could be natural.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be natural vegetation most likely, Yeah.
Is there only one place in Washington right now?
No, there's a few, and that's also in your fact sheets. But yeah, but the most famous one is the one that Rose has this experience with working at. Wish I knew that earlier. We may have to have you join our club.
I'm not ready to die.
I'm curious if you like looked at land, or there's pieces that have been assessed, or if there's a process of looking for the land, finding it, and then doing some kind of fundraiser where people are buying plots ahead of time that would help you purchase that land in addition. So if you think about, I imagine people in this valley would be really excited and could subsidize other costs by paying more money to have themselves a guaranteed spot.
That would be really nice, but I think realistically, our little club isn't powerful enough to do that. Maybe we will build our constituency and have some younger people that have more legal and real estate and money knowledge. And that'd be great. And it sounds like you're interested in. But that's a totally, I mean, it's maybe an option for sure, yeah. I mean, we've looked at land and, you know, and wanted it and made inquiries and stuff, but nothing's come through yet. But it only takes one person, you know? And people give land to the Conservancy all the time, so, yeah. Any more questions? Okay, thank you.
Good job, Amy.
Okay, thank you so much for this third and final Ducks in the Row session. I hope that everyone had a chance to maybe meet someone new or, you know, maybe exchange your number. A big part of what we do is not just education, but it's about connection and community. And that's as important to us as anything else. Any last questions? Any topics, especially from those who were here, all three, any other further topics that you're curious about that you would like to hear from an expert or someone? Yeah, Marisa.
I think it would be nice just because I think most people haven't experienced like someone dying and then what the actual like step-by-step process is after that. I think it would be helpful to just have someone say like, okay, because like just tonight there was a lot of questions around the coroner and calling 911 and like what are all the steps, because it is so confusing and so bureaucratic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be helpful.
Yeah, End of Life Washington does have quite an extensive checklist. And so, you know, going to the End of Life Washington as a website, as a resource, is a really good place to get a sense. And it's a big checklist. And I don't know if they have it sort of like, this needs to be done immediately, and kind of steps you through, this needs to be done within X amount of time. And so I followed that checklist. Any other thoughts, ideas, or?
We have the resource guides right here on the table.
Great.
Thank you for making those.
Yeah.
Yeah.